Welcome back. In this problem, we'll be learning how to create an automated cash receipts journal. So let's get started. Before we embark on this presentation, make sure that you've found and read or printed the directions for this problem. Have a blank Excel file open. You'll be creating it from scratch. And at the end, make sure you review your work very carefully to ensure that you've completed the assignment, and don't forget to only submit one file. The objectives of Problem 11 are to use proper model building techniques to create an automated cash receipts journal, to create a template that's flexible enough to be used on a repetitive basis. Don't forget, in any kind of a multi-column journal, as we're about to learn, you need to ensure that the debits equal the credits. And of course, as in all problems, we'll be creating a chart. So once again, you're creating your templates from scratch. That means your points will be awarded based on your planning, documentation, completeness, accuracy, appearance, and flexibility. So let's review the basics of a multi-column journal, also known as a cash receipts journal. And before we do that, I put this slide in here just to remind you of special accounts that we use for merchandisers. This isn't the first time you've seen this slide. So cash receipts usually involve receiving money from sales. So here's some sales related accounts. We will be using the sales account, which is the basic revenue account for a merchandiser. Many states, like California, have sales tax, and if a company lives in a taxable state, we would be using sales tax payable. However, in our example, for the ease of understanding, we are assuming that the company's Fanny's Flowers is a wholesale business and also lives in a state that does not have a sales tax. So because of both of those, we will not be using this account. Sales discounts is an account that we use to record early payment discounts given to the buyer by the seller. If there are any returns, we'll be using this contra revenue account called sales returns and allowances. And I know that we're going to be dealing with some credit card expenses, and we will be using bank credit cards like Visa and MasterCard. And to refresh your memory from Accounting 100, that means that the cash is recognized within the same day, usually within 24 hours of the sale. So because of that, we would be using the cash receipts journal to record this. So some accounting teachers don't cover the concept of a cash receipts journal. It may be in an appendix, but it's a very easy concept to understand. So there are several multi-column journals that accountants can use, and if a company chooses to use a multi-column journal, it's because the transactions have one thing in common. And in a cash receipts journal, the commonality is that cash is coming in for some purpose. So you might be asking yourself, what is a cash receipts journal? It's a special journal used to record and post transactions involving the receipt of cash. So cash receipt for any reason would be put in a cash receipts journal. So again, in summary, a cash receipts journal is a special type of journal used to record receipts of cash from any source. It has multiple columns or many columns, and we use it to save time when recording repetitive cash transactions. I'll demonstrate how it saves you time in just a little bit. And the benefits of a cash receipts journal is all entries for the receipt of cash are grouped in one place. Important facts about each transaction are written on a single line. And there is a limited need to enter account titles or long explanations because everything's grouped in one place. So for example, on your first transaction on your instructions, it said sold floral arrangements for $750 cash to Annie's Flowers issuing invoice 9312. If we were to record this transaction in a general journal format, we'd have to list a debit, we'd have to list a credit. If there was tax, we'd have a third account, and we have to put in a brief description of what's happening. So just on this transaction, it took us 3 to 4 lines to record that. You can imagine how much journal space is taken up by repetitive cash transactions. So instead of recording this transaction in the general journal that takes up a lot of time and space, you're going to learn to shortcut the process by using a cash receipts journal. We'll take that exact same transaction and we'll record it in a cash receipts journal. So let's exit out and go into our Excel spreadsheet. In the interest of time, I've created the following cash receipts journal. Yours does not have to look like this. If you Google the reference I gave you for more accounting knowledge, you'll see one that looks a little bit different. The most important thing in any cash receipts journal is this debit to cash will be used in all the transactions. So they call this a multi-column journal for obvious reasons. Multi means many. So in our cash receipts journal, we have a total of 6 columns. And the columns are outlined for you on the handout. So because this is a book of original entry, there is no need to have a data section or answer section. And that's because this is the first place a transaction gets recorded, which means it will change from day to day. So your time is going to be spent around the appearance and making this look like a real life journal or ledger. So you'll spend some time making sure that you create the appropriate columns, that you show the difference between the debits and the credits. You'll make sure that you've centered your columns just like I've done. You'll make sure that you've used actual ledger lines just like you see here. It should look like a cash receipts journal. Someplace at the bottom, you'll show the totals of all the columns, and at some point you'll have to show me or the user that the total debits equal the total credits. So let's jump in and start a transaction. In the first transaction dated January 1st, we sold floral arrangements for $750 cash to Annie's Flowers. So just like you saw on the regular general journal a moment ago, the journal entry is to debit cash for $750 and we'll credit sales just like we did on the general journal. This column is used for 2 reasons. If you would have had a number show up in the other column, you would define the general ledger account here. If this amount were in the accounts receivable column, you would put in the account name. Since this is a cash sale, it's not necessary to put any type of information in here. If you choose, you could put in an invoice number, but even that's not necessary. So let me go ahead and put in invoice number 9312. No other explanations necessary because it was a cash sale. So let's move on to the next one. On January 7th, it says that you received payment in full from Dandy's Daisies, and it gives you the invoice number. On the handout, you'll see that that was a sale left over from 12/30. Since the payment was made on January 7th, they are within the discount period, so they will be taking the discount. And again, the terms of all of the sales were 210 net 30, which means 2% discount if taken within 10 days. Otherwise, the whole thing's due in 30. So on this one, I would go figure out how much cash I received. And probably the easiest thing to do is to figure out the discount first. So looking up above on your handout, that original sale for Dandy's Daisies was for $450. So 450 times 2% would give me the sales discount. I know that the entire accounts receivable needs to come off the books, and that means the cash that I receive would be equal to the $450 minus the $9, which would be $441. Since I am using the accounts receivable column, I need to come over here and put the name of the customers because there's a subsidiary account someplace that also needs to be updated. If you wanted, you could put an invoice number. So I'll go ahead and put invoice 9205, and they didn't give us a check number, so we'll leave it at that. So you can see the reason that we would use a cash receipts journal is because it's taking us one line to record the transactions instead of 3 to 4 for each one of these in the general journal. So I hope you can see how this would result in a time savings. I'll go on to my next one. On January 8th, it says sold floral arrangements to DeMonte's Dahlias for $800. He used a Visa card to pay for his purchase. So we will recognize the sale of $800. We will go ahead and recognize the credit card expense. And at some place in your handout, it will tell you that the bank charges 3% for the credit card sales. So we would take our $800 times 3%, and that would show us that the bank is going to take $24 of that. So we would be left with cash of equivalent to the sum of those. That would be $776. Again, since there's no accounts receivable involved, we don't have to put anything over here in the account name. If you prefer to put data to track the sales, you could do that. That would be DeMonte's Dahlias and an invoice number maybe. So that's an example of how to use the cash receipts journal. When you're all done, don't forget to sum up the columns from left to right. So if I was creating this formula, it would be from the sum of the first one to the sum of the last one. I would press enter, and I could drag that across using the fill handle to compute the column totals. Don't forget, if you see a number sign insignia, that was a midterm question. It means that your column's not quite wide enough, so you can widen it just enough to fit. All of your columns should be the same size, so you might want to go in and work on making the columns equal distance from each other. And at some point, since it's a multi-column journal, you need to show me that debits equal credits. So for example, this says total debits, and that would be the sum of these three. So I'll go ahead and fill that in. The debits would be the sum of these three columns. The credits would be the sum of these three columns, actually these four columns, three columns, and they must balance by the time we're done. So let me take another look at this. After you've summed up the first column from the top to the bottom, we can drag that line across, make sure we pick up all the transactions, and the total debits are the sum of these three columns, and the total credits are the sum of these three columns. And the difference, just to show your user that there is no difference, you'll subtract the debits from the credits. So once again, the main focus on this one will be the appearance. Don't forget, always you should have the who, what, when. You can put the order of the columns, whatever you see fit. Mine's just an example. We've recorded the first three transactions together. You guys, like always, have check figures. I've showed that my debits equal my credits, and this one should be fairly easy once you get the setup. So spend some time on the setup process and getting it to look good, and you should be ready to go. So as always, start the problems early so that you can ask for help if you need it. And until next time, hope you have a good week.